During my video on Hassan Piker's shock collar escapades, I mentioned that he was still being dogged by the drama 1 month later, while he was streaming from his New York City hotel room, and viewers kept bringing it up. It turns out the reason that Hassan was in New York City was to attend the public victory party of one Zohran Mamdani, the new mayor of the Big Apple. If you saw that viral clip of Hassan proclaiming that America should have lost the Cold War to the Soviet Union, yeah, that came from that event.
What do you think it means that this guy ran as a socialist and anti-communism didn't work to stop him? That's big.
Yeah, I think we are in the heart of the imperial core. This is the country that defeated the USSR, unfortunately. And the reality of the matter is, there's a lot of antagonism. There's no class consciousness in the United States of America.
Now, if you don't know who Zohran Mamdani is, here's the rundown. Firstly, he's the new mayor of New York City, obviously. He's a far-left member of the Democratic Party. He's also a member of the DSA, the Democratic Socialist of America, the largest left-wing socialist organization in the United States. He's of Indian descent, though he was born in Uganda. His family moved to New York when he was 7 years old, back in 1998, though he didn't become an American citizen until 2018. He holds dual American and Ugandan citizenship. Throughout his youth, he was involved in left-wing activism. He co-founded his university's Students for Justice in Palestine chapter, and he graduated with a bachelor's degree in Africana Studies in 2014. Beginning in 2016, he found limited success as a rapper, and his music often touched on themes of race and colonialism. In 2017, he joined the DSA, primarily due to that organization's pro-Palestine stance, and he began to work as a staffer on various low-level political campaigns around New York. In 2020, he was elected to the New York State Assembly, and he successfully defended his seat in 2022 and 2024. So yeah, I think it's fair to say that Mamdani is a radical leftist, and he's clearly far more left-wing than I'm personally comfortable with. I think socialism is ultimately destructive to any economy, and leads to the utter ruination of all human flourishing. And though I have my criticisms of Israel, going full-on in the other direction and becoming a Palestine simp is also not the way to go. There are many good faith criticisms of Mamdani's track record, a lot of which were made by some of his detractors during the mayoral race. For example, I personally think it's terrible that Mamdani uses the phrase, globalize the intifada. The word intifada is Arabic for shaking off, and it refers to popular uprising or rebellion. In this context, it means a Palestinian revolution against Israel. The call to globalize the intifada is a call to make the Palestinian resistance against the Israeli state not a regional conflict, but a global one. Some people absolutely use this slogan as just a basic call for Palestinian support, but others use it to refer to the idea that all Jews worldwide must be fought in order for Palestine to be free. The fact that Mamdani is flirting with such a dangerous slogan, which can be used somewhat innocently, but is also commonly a dog whistle for more radical beliefs, I have serious problems with that. In fact, this is the same criticism I leveled at JD Vance in the last video, only here it's even more obvious. What makes this worse is that Mamdani seems to have no problem associating with the more radical elements pushing this slogan, or employing staffers who are completely alright with committing radical actions to achieve this goal.
The true believer knows that none of this is in vain, that this is all jihad, that this is all ibadah, and that this is all counted for by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so the conversation of doxing, the conversation of getting arrested and suspended, I think it's time for Muslims to start to say, all right, so what? Do what you want. I'm gonna do what I gotta do, because it's about time to do that. And I know everybody has their own families and has an education and everything. Just a question. We don't want to get doxxed, and we don't want to get suspended, and we don't want to get arrested. How gangsta are you? That's just my question. How much are you willing to do it?
Of course, beyond the radical Islam-Palestine stuff, there's also the radical socialist stuff. Back in 2021, he spoke at a DSA event, where he made it quite clear that his end goal is seizing the means of production.
What the purpose is about this entire project, it's not simply to raise class consciousness, but to win socialism. And obviously raising class consciousness is a critical part of that. But making sure that we have candidates that both understand that and are willing to put that forward at every which moment that they have, at every which opportunity that they're given. We have to continue to elect more socialists, and we have to ensure that we are unapologetic about our socialism. There are also other issues that we firmly believe in, whether it's BDS, right, or whether it's the end goal of seizing the means of production, where we do not have the same level of support at this very moment.
Of course, as mayor of New York City, he can't actually seize the means of production. The position of mayor doesn't have nearly enough power to do that. So, part of his campaign platform was to basically tax pricier areas of the city more, which obviously means taxing richer people more, as well as various rent control policies to help poorer residents. Now, I did a video on why rent control doesn't work like 4 years ago. The TLDR on that is that the one big study on rent control, the one out of San Francisco during the 90s, it showed that rent control did help alleviate rising rent in the short term, but the people who lived in rent-controlled units were less likely to move out even if they had a good reason to, which caused a whole bunch of downstream problems, like surrounding units being more expensive than they should have been due to decreased supply, or poor allocation of various unit types due to people not wanting to actually move out of what they have. However, I personally think it's pretty telling that Mamdani, or at least somebody on his team, thought it was a good idea to characterize this policy as taxing white neighborhoods. Now, he's not actually taxing based on race, he's taxing based on class. There's just more white people in the upper tax brackets, so fair enough. But the fact that they toss white into the description of this policy shows that, at least for the far left, racial identitarianism still has a grip on their thinking. In fact, housing has been a focus of Mamdani's for a long time now, from his student days.
My platform is that every single person should have housing. And I think faced with these two options, the system has hundreds of thousands of people unhoused, right? For what? And if there was any system that could guarantee each person housing, whether you call it the abolition of private property or you call it, just a statewide housing guarantee, it is preferable to what is going on right now.
To his DSA spokesman days.
We'll have to go beyond the market. We can establish community land trusts to gradually buy up housing on the private market and convert it to community ownership. We can give tenants a right of first refusal to buy out their landlords when buildings go up for sale. And we can fully commit to a new era of social housing, ending subsidies for luxury housing development and using our wealth to build beautiful, high-quality social housing projects that offer good homes and strong communities to everyone. We won't decommodify housing overnight, but we know what we have to do.
To his candidate days.
أنا كعمدة رح جمد الإيجارات لأكثر من 2,000,000 شخص وخلي الباصات سريع ومجاني وأضمن رعاية الأطفال شاملة لكل العائلات. ويمكن ما فيني أقنعك إنه الكنافة النابلسية بستاينواي أطيب من نيوجيرسي، بس بوعدكم إني رح أشتغل بكل جهدي لأسهل عليكم بفتح مشاريعكم الصغيرة وتدفعوا إيجاركم وتبنوا مستقبلكم في مدينة نيويورك.
He's nothing if not consistent. Of course, there are actual problems with decommodifying housing. When the government controls housing, you often get those gray commie apartment blocks that nobody actually takes care of because nobody actually owns them. New developments tend to stagnate due to a lack of capital investment. If you've been watching my channel for a few years now, you already know all of the good economic anti-socialist arguments. It kind of feels like I'm redoing 2021 right now, complete with the mainstream media putting out op-eds on how it's not actually socialism, guys, it's just treating people better, of course. But probably the most immediately destructive thing that Mamdani can actually do with the powers of this office is implement a soft-on-crime agenda. Back during the height of the George Floyd riots, Mamdani joined the chorus of leftists demanding the police be defunded. Of course, 5 years later, he's since walked that nonsense back. And good, considering that the idea is no longer popular, and those locations that actually tried it ended up having a complete shit show on their hands. Now, the DSA as an organization still wants to abolish what it calls the criminalization of working class survival, by which they mean abolishing the police and the prisons. But just because the DSA says it, doesn't mean that Mamdani has to agree with it. In fact, he seems to have a completely new angle to tackle New York's crime problems. Precogs.
Public safety is created by stable homes, good paying work, and well-resourced neighborhoods. Addressing these issues are at the core of our campaign. But we must also aggressively pursue evidence-based strategies that prevent violence and crime before they occur.
That's right, we're going full Minority Report here. Okay, real talk. His plan is not to defund, but de-emphasize the police, and tackle crime by first tackling poverty, second by placing trained and qualified crisis workers on public transit and other public areas, and third, only relying on police as a last resort. You know what? I recall this exact debate raging back during the 2021 Twitch poll era, where retards like Vosh were saying that if a person was going schizo, a social worker and not a police officer should be the first responder. And those debates pretty quickly unearthed the problem with that approach. Sometimes the schizo person in question, even if he's innocent and it's not his fault, he might be uncontrollably violent anyway, and he has to be stopped with force first, and his mental issues treated second. Life isn't like an RPG, where a high enough persuasion skill can talk anybody down from anything. Sometimes you do just need the cops there. Additionally, Mamdani just kinda sounds like he views reducing the number of criminals as an a priori good, no matter what. Like, listen to this.
The jail population of Rikers has increased since Eric Adams has come into office by more than 1,000 additional incarcerated New Yorkers. And what is quite staggering to me is that we know that we can reduce that jail population to less than 4,000. I mean, Vital City had an article about a number of different proposals that could reduce it to 3,700. And some of this also just has to look at the average stay on Rikers in the 90s was 50 days. Now it's more than 100. There are more than 1,500 people on Rikers who have been held there for more than a year.
I think we all agree. If there were less people in prison because there were less criminals, that's pretty good. But releasing people from prison who should be there, simply to say that you managed to bring that number down, that's actually pretty bad. It's better for prison numbers to be high and everyone in there actually deserve to be there than it is for prison numbers to be artificially low because you're just letting the guilty go. In case it's not clear yet, I don't like Mamdani. He's way too far left for me, and the majority of his ideas would absolutely be destructive. The only saving grace is that, as New York City mayor, he actually can't really implement most of this stuff, at least not unilaterally. Now, I did see a lot of right-wingers go over all these various critiques of Mamdani, but you want to know what I saw the right-wingers cover the most? It wasn't his activist history, or his connections to radical Islamists, or his shitty socialist ideas. It was the fact that he did that one ad spot where he ate rice with his hands. Really, guys? Okay, yeah, I find this gross too, but you know there's real criticisms of the man, right? Do we really gotta waste time on this? Here, I'll just speedrun this part of the conversation. If your hands are clean enough to do a handshake with somebody else after eating, then that's an appropriate finger food. That means yes to stuff like cookies and sandwiches, and pizza that's not too greasy, and no to stuff like pasta or steak, or anything with sauces on it. But Dev, you might ask, what about ribs or wings? Those are finger foods, aren't they?
What's going on? I know you're from where you're from.
We're foreign. Well, we don't know what we're doing.
Stop with the knives.
No, you don't need a knife?
No, you take your fingers and you lift that up and you eat it.
Okay.
Not with a fork.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Enjoy holding your food and eating it like that.
Well, yes, they are. And I don't like that either. Plus, there's a reason that people who eat that stuff have a stack of napkins beside them, and some of them even wear bibs, because it's messy food. When it comes to rice, or curry, or soup, or other food that is just liquid, shoveling that shit onto your tongue with your hand is just kind of gross. But ribs or wings, they are messy, yeah, but they're solid food. You hold on to the bone of the thing because there's really no other place to grab it, and then you bite the meat off with your teeth. You're not scooping liquid with your hands and pouring it into your mouth. I don't like either of these messy fucking practices, but the brainlet leftoids on Twitter, pretending that they were completely the same and the only possible complaint about Mamdani's eating habits was racism, they were just being retarded partisans. And yet, a lot of the rightoid complaints about Mamdani's eating habits actually were just racism. Like, you know what? There's a non-racist way to talk about this, and the rightoids overwhelmingly chose the racist one. You guys dislike Mamdani shoveling food into his mouth, using his bare hand, because you think that it's some third world, brown, unhygienic, barbaric practice. Meanwhile, I dislike Mamdani's eating habits, because I understand that he's a rich theater kid who's fully assimilated into the Western leftist subculture of virtue signaling how exotic he is towards his white cosmopolitan allies, as a form of in-group performance art, meant explicitly to fetishize himself in their eyes in order to earn their support. We are not the fucking same here. Okay, there is actually a real conversation underneath all of this. At least I think so. And it's one that I'm not sure the right is equipped to have. There's a law on the books in America that says you can't be a communist or a member of a communist organization. Would it stand up to First Amendment scrutiny? I'm not sure, probably not, but it's still currently in force. Is the DSA a communist organization? Well, they'd probably say no, they're a socialist one. But is that just a semantic difference? It might be. Additionally, in the guidelines of the naturalization process, it also says your citizenship application can be rejected if you associate with a communist party, or any other totalitarian political party like a fascist party, for example, or a terrorist organization. Any association with such a group within the past 10 years is an automatic fail. So, when Mamdani filled out this part of the form back in 2018, 1 year after he joined the DSA, did he lie? Is the DSA a communist organization, as far as the law is concerned? Does this invalidate Mamdani's citizenship? Should it? Should dual citizenship individuals even be allowed to hold office, given they have divided loyalties between the two countries? After all, how do you know that they're not acting on behalf of the other country that they're loyal to? I think there's a good faith conversation to be had about all these questions. I don't think the left is equipped to have it, because they consider asking the questions to be racist. And I don't think the right is equipped to have it either, because their answers actually do just end up being real racism. Nonetheless, despite all of this, Mamdani is the next mayor of New York City, and there is a fair bit to say about that election itself, but that's more of a story for a future Cuomo video. What I want to talk about is what this election means. Mamdani is a guy who is way too far left, and yet he still won. A lot of people are saying that socialism has won and New York has fallen. But you know what? I don't think so. I think this is a referendum on Trump, and let me tell you why. The New York City mayor's race wasn't the only election held back on November 4th. There were 6 seats in Congress, 2 governor's races, and a bunch of state-level positions that were all up for grabs. And the amount that the Democrats won took everyone by surprise. The Democrats held on to pretty much all of their various positions, while also taking the Virginia governor's seat, the Virginia attorney general, and a whole bunch of other down-ballot races. The pollster Ryan Brune laid out his metrics for how good of a night the Democrats could have possibly had. For example, if Abigail Spanberger won the Virginia governor's race, that's 1 point to the Democrats. If she won by more than Kamala Harris's margin in Virginia during the last presidential election, another point to the Dems. If she won by a margin larger than 14%, a third point, and so on. And it really seems like the Democrats just won all of these predictions, even the outlandish ones, the ones they weren't expected to win. Even taking into account the fact that it was expected the left would be galvanized to come out more in order to show their disapproval of the Trump administration, everyone was surprised by just how much the Democrats won on November 4th. The victory that triggered the rightoids the most, even more than Mamdani, was Jay Jones winning the Attorney General's race in Virginia. Jones's private messages from 2022 had leaked, where he talked about shooting Virginia's then House Speaker, Republican Todd Gilbert. Jones was universally condemned for this by both Democrats and Republicans, even by Spanberger, who he campaigned with. And yet, Jay Jones still won. The text leak did narrow the gap between him and his opposition in the polls, but it wasn't enough to actually cause him to lose. The right wing interpreted this as the left simply not caring about political violence on their own side. Meanwhile, the left wing interpreted this as the right's actions while in power being so genuinely awful that the electorate still rejected Trumpism at the ballot box, despite Jones's scandal. And oh my god, the amount of Twitter salt this unearthed is fucking unmatched. Every rightoid pundit, every talking head, they're all screaming fucking murder over this. Because they know this is a blanket rejection of what they've been doing for the past year. They know that Trump and his movement are becoming so unpopular so quickly that the normies are voting for anybody but a Trump candidate, no matter if it's a socialist or a scandal-ridden scumbag or whatever. That is just how much the average American hates the Trumpists right now. And every single fucking cope came out. How could they have rejected us? All of our enemies are evil for handing us this L. It's all those illegals casting the ballots. If it wasn't for all of those voters voting, the Democrats would never win. The billionaires are rigging the game for the Dems. Yes, it turns out the populist right hates capitalism just as much as the populist left. Steve Bannon, Jack Posobiec, Matt Walsh, they're all screaming about George Soros and the donor class and all that shit. Even Trump crashed the fuck out, demanding that House and Senate Republicans begin ramming legislation down everyone's throats as fast as they can. Hey, listen, you don't gotta do the MAGA tears thing, alright? Don't you recall the 2015 internet bedroom feminists? This means semen. Put the mug down, okay? Here's what I think is the most hope-pilling part of all of this. Yes, it was a Democrat sweep. Yes, I don't like Mamdani, and I think if he gets the chance, he will damage New York with his far-left insanity. But of all the races that Democrats won, the establishment liberal types won with greater margins than populist socialist types. Hell, even a few of the absolute fucking craziest radicals, like that far-left Somalian nationalist, Omar Fateh, just straight up fucking lost, not to Republicans, but to establishment center-left Democrats. And just as the online right was coping and seething that nobody actually likes them, the online left was also coping and seething, that with the exception of Mamdani himself, the libs were beating out their radical picks.
A bunch of centrist types held Mike Sherrill up as their ideal candidate. What's the cope from them on the race seemingly being so tight? Bro, he won by a bigger fucking margin than Mamdani so far. Okay. I don't know why the left is just so mad after a night of huge wins. I know why. It's because they're not friends. They're not friends of the Democrat Party. They're not friends of Social Democrats. They're not friends of liberals. They're not friends of people who are not them.
November 4th was a big win for the Democrats, not only because establishment liberals conquered Republicans from the right, but also progressives and populists from the left. Let's be real here, guys. Liberals have been under siege from both sides for like a decade now, and this was a clear sign that people want the pre-Trump normal back. If they're forced to choose between MAGA and the far left, they'll reluctantly choose the far left, and the far left is a problem. But if there's a center to center left liberal option, that is what people want right now most of all. So yeah, I actually feel pretty good about all this. Not because of Mamdani, he's a fucking train wreck, but because I think the 2026 Democrat comeback is gonna be biblical. We are poised for a lib return and I am here for it. Also, I guess there is a silver lining to Mamdani after all. After he had that sit-down one-on-one with Hassan Piker, and he realized how fucking stupid he was, Mamdani left Hassan off the invite-only list to the VIP lounge at his victory party, which Hassan embarrassingly found out about while live-streaming the whole thing. Whoops.
I do not have you for the upstairs list.
Okay.
Can I see your ticket type?
Oh, I'm staff. I'm just escorting him.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Okay.
You're
so we can't
escorted?
go upstairs.
So they're not on the list for upstairs?
I do not. But do you have this wristband? I can also just check. Chat.
Well, so I thought movement windows could go upstairs, no?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Damn.